For those unfamiliar with Final Fantasy, it is a very long-running Japanese role-playing game, or JRPG. With 15 mainline games, another on the way, and countless spin-offs in various forms, it has come a long way as both a series and as a fanbase. While I am a younger fan of the series, and I did grow up with more developed games, I feel that looking back on the earlier games is important to understanding how the series developed to where it is. This first game is the start of a lot of series staples, and without the structure the first few games provide, Final Fantasy, as we know it today, might have been completely different. With Final Fantasy I being an almost 36-year-old game, and it having been 6 years since I last played it, I decided to replay it to see how it held up. There are many things that can sway someone's opinion on a game. A deal breaker for one might be what makes the game for another. For me, whether or not I enjoy a game really boils down to 5 main sections: characters, story, exploration, combat, and music. Not necessarily in that order. Without further ado, let's get into my thoughts about Final Fantasy I. So our game starts off when our valiant party of 4, Eiji, M, Sean, and Nina, which was supposed to be Dill, but I messed it up and didn't notice, set out on an epic journey. The game gives you a bit of freedom with your party, giving you 6 classes to choose from: Warrior, Thief, Monk, White Mage, Black Mage, and Red Mage. Essentially, they all specialize in something different at the expense of something else. I decided to go with the Warrior, Thief, White Mage, and Black Mage, rather than the Red Mage or the Monk. I went for the basic setup essentially, but I kinda wish I picked a Red Mage because they're one of my favorite starter classes in other Final Fantasy games. Now, these characters are blank slates, which makes it easy to insert myself, and in this case my siblings, into the journey. But in terms of the narrative, I don't know how these 4 know each other or what we're supposed to be doing. All I really know is that we have these crystals that are allegedly similar to those that the prophesized 4 Heroes of Light are supposed to carry. Some rando guard in the starter city Cornelia noticed my crystals and sent me straight to the king, who told me I need to go rescue his daughter. So off the great heroes go, and that's the start of our journey. While many people who play this game have some sort of nostalgia factor with it, I do not. Unfortunately, what was amazing for the time period comes off as bare bones for me, because I'm not playing it in the time period in which it was new, and novelty, and cool, and awesome. Our characters in this installment aren't really characters. They lack any form of personalities, names, backstories, or anything really that makes me see them as characters rather than just like the blank vehicle for which this adventure is taking place. Now, while this doesn't matter for most people, I am a very character-orientated game player. That's one of the reasons why I love Kingdom Hearts so much. So the lack of such interesting and dynamic characters is a bit of a blow, but it doesn't ruin the game. Now, during that ramble, I managed to acquire some new gear and some spells for my Black and White Mages. So now we're ready to set off for the Chaos Shrine in search of Princess Sarah. On our way there, we run into some nasty-looking goblins and other such ghouls and goblins and evil things and stuff. And of course, being the stellar heroes we are, we have to clean up a bit. So essentially, each character is equipped with basic skills: attack, flee, equip, items, etc. However, each class is also able to do something special too, like our mages being able to cast their specific brands of magic. Our characters take turns based on their stats, and then the enemies get their turn too. Basic turn-based combat stuff. I love turn-based combat. I wish games would go back to using it sometimes. Anyways, each of these nice goblins give us XP, which levels our character's stats, and it's usually something pertaining to the character. For example, my warrior will level up agility or stamina, while my black mage will level up his intelligence. As I mentioned, I enjoy turn-based combat, and I think the reason for that is the large hand strategy and planning has in your ability to make your way through the game, rather than nimble fingers and a little bit of luck. While there is always luck involved in games, especially early Final Fantasies, where while you do have some control over it to an extent, there is a lot of things that can happen just based on random RNG BS. There is a large portion of strategy involved as well. Final Fantasy's combat is largely based on how you plan your actions. Who do you pair up to take down what enemy? What level of spell do you use? Sure, your Black Mage can hit both of those giants with a Fire that costs 15 MP, but you can also pull off the battle in 2 turns by pairing up your Warrior and Thief to take down one, and your Black Mage hitting the other with a Fire, thus saving you MP and allowing you to journey further without stopping. Strategy is even bigger in the original NES version of the game, due to the fact that your characters will miss if you set them all to attack one enemy that dies in one hit. It's essentially a failsafe to ensure you can't button mash your way through the game. Personally, I didn't experience that annoyance as I played the PSP version. So the most annoying thing I had to go through was using 3 X potions on my white mage who kept dying before the X potion could be used, so I was basically throwing the item away, but no big. As I said, Final Fantasy I is bare bones. It's simple. However, the strategy-based gameplay that continues on throughout the series starts here. It's a good skeleton for the job system that's perfected later on. I feel as though I should mention that one of my turnoffs for this game is the extremely high encounter rate. I'm not sure the exact numbers, or even if the encounter rate is considered high for a game like this, but I do know that getting through dungeons could be a real slog. Now that we've obliterated those goblins, we finally make it to the Chaos Shrine, which is also home to one of my favorite tracks in the game, but I'll hold off on talking about the music for now because there'll be a whole appreciation rant dedicated to that later. So this guy named Garland kidnapped Princess Sarah. We defeat Garland, and in return the king builds us a nice bridge and Sarah gives us a loot. We find out that monsters are popping up all over the world, and that the world is essentially dying. So it's our job to go restore light to the 4 crystals to stop this growing darkness from seeping over the world. Or we can wander around like lost idiots for a couple hours, because that's what I did on my first playthrough. So I ended up heading eastward and landing in a town called Pravoka. I don't know if that's how you say it, but that's how I'm saying it. Where the people are begging me to help them. So I find the most suspicious person in town, a pirate named Bike, who sadly I recognize from Strangers of Paradise, and decided to challenge him to a duel. We of course don't actually fight him and instead wipe the floor with his crew, and in exchange for not messing him up too, he gives us a boat, which unlocks further exploration. After a couple hours of wandering, I start to get the ball rolling. I obtained the crown from the marsh cave and took it back to the king. Plot twist, he was the evil dark elf Astos. So we kick his butt and he gives us a crystal eye, which we take back to Matoya, who gives us a jolt tonic, which allows us to wake up the elf prince, and he gives us a mystic key, and the mystic key opens up something cool, and blah 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 blah. You see where I'm going with this? The game continues on in this sort of linear fetch request it has happening. We go to a place, we get an item, it opens the next place, we keep on going. Eventually, we start to see some real progress and story development, or at least as much story development we're gonna see in a game that came out in the 1980s. Our characters defeat the Lich, who's been feeding off the Earth Crystal and thus rotting the land. Doing so, however, draws the attention of the Fire Fiend. In similar fashion to earlier, we need to go to a place, get an item before we can progress. Eventually, we get to this place called the Crescent Lake, a town with 12 sages who tell us some interesting tidbits. And the only reason I bring them up, the only reason why they're any different from any other grab and fetch and go to the next place thing, is just because of one particular line one of the sages says. He says, "The 4 fiends plot to rule the world, past and present." And I found this interesting because they used present tense plot to describe how their actions in both the past and present. And I really enjoyed that because time shenanigans is a staple in Final Fantasy. As much as we all clown on it when it pops up nowadays, Namura again, it has always been there. I love the fact that they foreshadowed the time shenanigans that takes place in this game in a way that's just like so subtle and in such a throwaway kind of fashion. I almost could just be reading too far into it, to be honest. Like it's that throwaway that I didn't even realize until I read that line of dialogue while collecting footage, and I just cackled to myself. It's just a part of the game that made my eyebrows go up, and I remembered why I love it when games foreshadow things like that. But yeah. At this point, I have 2 crystals and a hint on how to get an airship, another series staple. Game continues with the usual item quest line. We get a thing, it opens a new thing. We get an airship, which opens access to newer new things, and so on and so forth. And then, we come to the only other character development we get in this game. The Dragon King Bahamut, or Bahamut, depending on which game you played first, or how you say it, tells us to prove our courage to him by heading to the tower northeast. We do so and collect, guess what, another item. More specifically, a rat's tail. And then the very nice Dragon King upgrades our characters into super cool versions of themselves. So, you know, my black mage is now a black wizard, my white mage is now a white wizard, my thief is now a ninja, and my warrior is now a knight. With that out of the way, we're able to secure the last 2 crystals, the wind and water ones from Tiamat and Kraken respectively. So finally, with all the crystals retrieved, I headed back to Cornelia to rest up before going to the Chaos Shrine, because I was pretty sure that was where I was headed next. Thankfully, some suspicious dude by the fountain confirmed that was where I was going, so thank you to him. So the rest of the Chaos Shrine is now available to us. Using Sarah's loot, we travel 2,000 years in the past, and surprise, surprise, the four fiends are back. Doing that plotting thing in the past, you know? We tear through them again, and we finally get to the bottom of the mystery. Essentially, Garland, the knight we killed at the very, very beginning of the game, you know, the one who kidnapped Sarah, created this time loop. Essentially, the four fiends send him to the past, right after we kill him? Question mark? It says we do kill him, but it's not very clear. But yeah, they send him to the past, and he sends them to the future once he gets to the past 2,000 years ago, and it creates this time loop of death and destruction. Timey-wimey BS, Final Fantasy stuff, you know? Anyways, Garland transforms into Chaos, and we gotta kill Chaos. The battle itself took me much longer than I expected it would, because of his tendency to use Kiraja, but the fight in and of itself isn't too difficult, with it following a general pattern of multi-target magic attacks and occasional physical attacks. If you get unlucky, Earthquake can be a bit annoying, but generally there aren't too many moves that will outright destroy you. With Chaos gone, the final theme and credits start up, marking the end of our journey across time. The theme is grand and noble, befitting heroes of time, but also melancholy, because with the end of the time loop, no one remembers our struggle or our journey. Only through word of mouth, through some vague, fantastical story, are the Warriors of Light remembered, but their deeds live on through the results of their quest, through a world bathed in light. So, something I could gush about for hours is the music in the Final Fantasy series. I'm playing Theatrhythm right now, and that just kind of reminded me about how damn good the music is in every single game. Literally, no matter how good the other aspects of the game are, or how bad, one thing that remains consistent throughout this entire series is just how staggeringly beautiful the music is. I love Final Fantasy I because it acts as a starting point in many aspects, but in the music especially. This is the game where we first hear the prelude and the main theme. Songs that always get me ready for a grand adventure. But at the same time, they lack melodies that I'm very familiar with, because this is the beginning, the start. There's so much room to grow. It also introduces that bass line in the battle theme that reappears throughout the series. And I don't know about you guys, but I remember how hype everyone got when the bass line returned in the Final Fantasy IX battle theme. People still talk about it sometimes. If I had to pick one track from this game, my favorite would be the Sunken Shrine. However, while collecting footage for this video, the Flying Fortress theme did give it a run for its money. And, of course, the end theme overall was just chef's kiss. It was very, very, very good. Now, just because the game is over doesn't mean there isn't more stuff to do, at least in the version I played, PSP version. I didn't really want to play the NES version because even for me, it was a little bit too dated. Like, I knew it wouldn't be able to hold my attention span. So I just saved myself the pain and suffering and just decided to go with the apparently best version of the game, which is the PSP version. So yeah, in this one, there are these 4 caves that open up after you defeat each fiend. So the first one is the Earthgift Shrine, and I actually went there right after defeating Lich because I thought it was the next place to go because of the cutscene that played afterwards. It's not the next place to go, it's a bonus dungeon, and essentially each bonus dungeon is based kind of off not only the element of the crystal that it just had, but also the music and the bosses are based off a future Final Fantasy game. So the Earthgift Shrine was Final Fantasy III, the Hellfire Chasm was Final Fantasy IV, the Whisperwind Cove was Final Fantasy VI, and I will say the rearranged version of the Final Fantasy VI boss theme in this game is really, really, really good. I enjoyed it. I actually just had a boss theme playing for a while just so I could listen to it because it was just really good. And the Lifespring Grotto, which was Final Fantasy V. Yeah, these dungeons were okay. They were really just length dungeons. I liked the music and everything, and I liked getting the equipment. But other than that, there wasn't anything like super duper special about them. The only other extra dungeon was the Dungeon of Time, which was in the Chaos Shrine, and that suspicious dude in Cornelia that I thought was leading us to the Chaos Shrine for the final boss was actually leading us there. And I actually went through that dungeon like 4 or 5 times because I thought that was the end. And I was kind of like, I don't remember the end being this difficult. I don't remember that. And that was because it wasn't. I was in the wrong place. So yeah, essentially the whole concept of the Dungeon of Time is it revolves around big surprise time. We give up some of our abilities, and in exchange for said abilities, we get more time to solve these puzzles. And if we solve certain puzzles, we get to go deeper into the shrine, and we get to get better equipment and better treasures and stuff. And yeah, it was okay. Some of the puzzles were pretty annoying. The Dragon Eyes one, yikes. But yeah, that was really all the extra stuff. The only other really extra thing was in the Flying Fortress, you could find the Adamantite, which you could take to one of the dwarf smiths, and he would make you the Braveheart weapon. I didn't do that on my playthrough. I knew that you could do it, I just didn't bother looking for the item. So I didn't do that, but I know it's a thing that you can do. And yeah, that was really all the additional content. Alright, and now we're on to my bonus thoughts lightning round. Just random thoughts I had while playing the game, which didn't really fit into one section. So during our quest, we end up in a place called the Earth Cavern, and this one stretch of it is just like random encounters at every single step. And it's great for grinding, but it can get really tedious and annoying, and it leads literally nowhere. I actually was stuck in that space for like half an hour, and I got out of it, and I was like, cool, maybe there's treasure at the end, and it was just a circle, and I was like, that's annoying. Item hunting. One of my characters was stoned and not in the fun way, and I had to hunt down where to find gold needles, which was fine for me because as soon as I got petrified, I knew that I needed a gold needle. But like a new player who didn't know that, that would be so annoying. Just like trying to go into every single item shop and just being like, please, sir, do you have the item I need to get rid of this status ailment? There's a cool puzzle in the Earth Gift Shrine where these palm trees essentially acted as arrows, and when I figured it out as soon as I saw them, I felt pretty clever. In Elfenheim, I found Link from The Legend of Zelda's gravestone. I found it by accident, but I kind of chuckled when I read it. I know that's old news for people who have like played the game before and been on the internet for the last 10 years, but guess what? I've been living under a rock. It was funny. NPCs do not move out of the way. It's quite frustrating. They just stand there, and I'm stuck behind them, and I'm stuck behind them for very long periods of time, and it's terrible. And last but not least, I actually like the fact that the game doesn't really hold your hand. You're like, essentially in the story, you're just like a bunch of travelers who kind of banded together, and you have no idea what you're doing or where you're going. You just decide you're gonna save the world. So I like the fact that essentially the whole game we're just kind of desperately asking people things they know. We're like, sir, you saw a shiny object falling somewhere. Could you tell us more about that? It gives it more of an authentic feel. We're just like harassing town folks for tips on where to go, and that's cool. In conclusion, this game is dated, yes. Even though I played the PSP version, and I know I'm mentioning that a lot, but it is important because they're quite different, I still found it to be slow. And I still found it to be bare bones, and I still found it to be basic, and I still found it to be all those things that other people have been saying it is for a while. However, despite all that, it's the start of the music. It's the start of the combat that eventually turns into the job system that's so iconic. It's the start of a lot of things that make Final Fantasy what it is today. So even though it didn't age too well and it's not a fantastic game, it still deserves to be acknowledged as one of the greats in the series, just for where it brought us.